Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're excited to see you at Core 90 training for the community with eXp Realty.
Welcome, everybody. I hope you're having a great Wednesday so far. We're excited to talk with you today. We're hitting on some topics that are really pertinent to what's going on right now. Last week, we had Christine Kites talk to us about setting up listings the right way in light of the new NAR information and working with those sellers as you navigate kind of some new market realities. Today, we're going to focus on win-win scenarios in working with buyers and sellers. And then next week, we're going to have a really cool panel of leaders and experts to talk about setting expectations for buyers and sellers. So we kind of have this nice little 3-week kind of string of topics that fit together really beautifully. And I'm excited. You know, the news that I've heard out there lately has been that people are selling real estate right now, you guys.
Heck yeah.
We're not being stopped. You know, the people that have kind of given up and checked out are the people that aren't just tuning in to find out how to deal with this, how to manage stuff, and how to keep selling real estate. Because I don't know about you guys, but where we live, people still need to live somewhere.
Now, we do have an exceptionally high, or have had over the past couple months, termination or cancellation rate. And so we're going to talk today about how to create win-wins so if everybody wants to stay in that deal, right? If we can create a juice that's sweet enough, everybody's going to want to drink it, kind of a thing. We're going to talk about how to do that and hopefully to shine the light on some negotiation points and positions that are going to be really important for people to understand. And maybe these are things you've considered, maybe they aren't. But the other thing that we've done is we've aggregated all that data and we've placed it in one place. So we're going to have some slides today that I think everyone's going to be excited to get a screenshot of, because it's like every single negotiation point in a deal, stuff like that, how you can handle all of that, and also how to bring the other side toward you instead of feeling like you always have to pick up a battle axe and go swinging at the other person's head. It's really exciting stuff.
And, you know, like everything else, this may not be new information for you. I know that we have incredible agents that are well seasoned. They know what they're doing. They're out there every day. The point of Core 90 is not only to bring a reminder, but I think there are some nuggets every single time we have a presentation where you might learn something new or a new tactic or a new position on something. So we're excited to bring this to you today.
Absolutely.
You ready?
Yeah, for sure. I do remember early in my career kind of learning about this idea of win-win, and I was quite a bit more confrontational then than I am now. And so I was like, no way, I'm just going to win at all costs. And what I've realized over time is you can really want to be highly competitive and still structure win-win deals that make everybody feel good about the deal, even at the end. Like everything was their idea, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a higher level of thought than just trying to win at all costs. So we're going to talk about how to do that. I'm really excited. Let's see if I can get my portion of my screen working here. Hopefully, kind of, sort of. 1 second. All right. So the win-win formula, we're going to be talking about creating deals where everyone walks away happy. It's a big thing.
So we're going to do an overview of what a win-win deal looks like, because we all kind of know that concept, but honestly, what does that really mean in real estate? There are a million different ways to slice up this pie. So we're going to talk about some of those and the importance of understanding both parties' needs in a transaction. And both parties, I mean, we're looking at kind of buyer-seller side, but honestly, we all know there are other partners involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are other ways that we can leverage those partners and those circumstances and aspects of the transaction to find that win-win scenario. Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to buy a house and feel like crap about it. And nobody really wants to sell a house and feel like they got railroaded or that they left money on the table or just leave with a bad feeling. It's a big transaction for most people and it should feel good. And I think as agents, it's our responsibility to take on that role. We're the professionals.
Absolutely.
This is an emotional ride for a lot of people. And it's our job and our responsibility to take the emotion out of it and keep it transactional and keep people focused on what this is really about in the moment, so that then when they get away, they feel like, okay, we have a great house, or hey, we sold our house. Go us.
Yep. Well, and this is a huge part of getting people to come back and want to do future business with you. And not, as Lexy just said, there are other parties and partners. Let's think about how agents can be win-win on their side, right? How agents working with their buyer, where it could be win-win for the agent and the buyer, or the agent and the seller, et cetera. So a lot of those parties, we're going to pull that in. The power of win-win in real estate, the bottom line here, guys, is that it's a long-term relationship builder. And maybe that relationship is with your clients. Maybe it's with the other agent, right? Ultimately, this may not be the last time you ever, let's say, write an offer on one of their listings, or they write an offer on yours and now you have to negotiate with them. And so building that relationship builds some future capital that you can deduct from as you need to beyond this transaction. And that's a really important thing. I mean, you've been great at this.
Well, and what I think is really important is the reality is we are going to have to engage with other agents repeatedly, right? If you stay in the same market for a long time, you're going to have repeat transactions with certain agents. And how many of you guys, you can put it in the chat, or you can, raise your hand and say, yeah, how many of you guys have one or two or three or four, heaven forbid, agents in your market where when you see their name come up on a deal, you're like, oh,
Cringe.
yeah, I don't want to work with them. So the goal is you don't want to be that person. And I always kind of decide that when a person like that comes up in my head, I make it my goal to make them an ally, and to make them a friend, and to try to figure out, what is it about them that makes them difficult and notorious, for being difficult in the marketplace, so that you can kind of conquer that and move forward with them, because you are going to have repeat transactions with agents that you don't like.
Yep.
And that's a bummer.
Even the most difficult agents, though, have agents they love doing business with. Maybe you could be that one, and now they're not difficult any longer. It's a great thing. So agent to agent rapport is critical in the industry. It really just is, guys. And the words to use for this is that we want to be cooperative, not adversarial. My favorite one is collaborative, not competitive, because it's got the C's at the beginning. It's easier to remember. But ultimately, the bottom line here is that the other agent is not your enemy, right? Sometimes we treat it like they are. Well, they're trying to kill the deal. Well, maybe, but that does happen sometimes, where they're just kind of stumbling their way through. But our job then is to try to smooth and soften those rough edges, because we want to keep the deal together. And ultimately, agents all only get paid when we're able to bring a buyer and a seller successfully together to a closing table and get a closing across the finish line.
I like to remind agents, like, last time I checked, the only way that we get paid is when we actually close a deal. And we all have a lot of time, blood, sweat, maybe some tears involved up to that point. And we know that there's some fragility in throughout the transaction. I mean, there are a lot of different contingencies. We're going to talk about all that kind of stuff. But I like to remind agents, like, hey, listen, none of us get paid, including title, the lender, you, me, our clients don't get to buy or sell a house. Like, we've got to figure this out. And really, it's in our hands. We are the hub, and everybody else is the spoke. And if we screw that up in the middle, we're really kind of ruining it. So I think thinking about DISC, Jeff and I, we love DISC, and we talk about this all the time. But think about the DISC. Are you flexing so that you're having positive communications with this person? If I am my normal high D, but I'm talking to a high S agent and I'm not giving them information that would be helpful, or even just being kind of chatty and doing going through the niceties, they're going to feel like I'm being cold, and that's not my intent. So it's really important to always think about, what's the best way for me to communicate with this other agent.
And you can look for clues. The next one here simply says, if they're being a butthead, they're likely stressed out. I love that Joanne said, it's either yay when you see another agent on the other side of a deal, or it's, oh no, right? It's so true. And we don't want to be the oh no agent. Just remember that. But also, when you have one of the oh no agents, and then they turn into, if they do that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, and suddenly their shirt's on the floor and they're green, right? So what is it about that? Chances are that's a stress response that they have unfortunately developed some negative emotional response patterns around. And I think our ability to kind of think a little bit more like a therapist or psychologist helps us to understand and contextualize that where it's not personal. And you don't need to throw your defenses up. You can simply maintain a low key stance and continue to engage in the transaction on behalf of your client. That's your job, as it turns out. And so you can ask questions. We have this here that don't provoke a negative emotional response. Well, why did you do that? Is going to provoke a negative. Has anyone ever been in a relationship before, right? And you do something stupid. I do it all the time. And then your partner, hopefully not in this case, but your partner might say, "Why'd you do that?" Right? And why tends to provoke that person and make them feel like they need to do what? Defend themselves. And anytime you're throwing up the other party's defenses, you've asked for trouble. And you don't
So,
want trouble.
and asking why questions really does tend to put people on the defensive. We've talked a lot about Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, about negotiations, right? And if you're looking for a good book to read, man, that is so fun. It's a great book to listen to.
Yeah.
But it just makes me think, what are the ways that you can ask a question without saying why? So if you do hear that an agent is stressed or doing things that you're not sure, and not totally understanding why, maybe calling and saying, "Hey, I've noticed that there's some hesitation or we've had some really long response times. I'm curious, are there things that we could be providing on our end that might make it a little bit easier, or are there things that are happening on that side that we just don't know about?" Whatever. Just and
How could we work
sometimes,
together? How can we
yeah,
speed things up? How is a great question that doesn't tend to. And think about it also from the other side. If the other agent hasn't attended this training today, right? There's a good chance they're going to ask you why questions. Don't take the bait. Don't be a fish that sees the shiny lure and then you get all worked up. How? Why? I'll tell you why. You don't do that. It's unnecessary. And so ultimately, just don't take the bait. Simply maintain your cool and come up with a really nice, calm response that doesn't need to now engage in World War III with the other agent, right? So really, really good stuff. And the last point here, just remember there are no real fires in real estate, right? Sometimes it's fun to feel like it's all life and death. It's not. It's just not. So don't project your emotions onto the deal. You're ultimately going to harm your client's position, and your job is to be a fiduciary, which means you need to keep a cool head. Don't assume certain terms or conditions will make anyone feel anything. Just start neutral. This is something Lexy talks about a lot, and then ask questions. If you start neutral, it's really nice. It's kind of like when somebody says, "Oh, this thing happened," and you go, "Oh, that's terrible," but they thought it was good, right? Or, "Oh, wow, that's amazing," and they thought it was terrible. So starting neutral simply means you could ask, "Okay, how do you feel about that?"
yeah.
In a neutral way.
And giving the information before, instead of saying, "Ugh, we did not get the response we wanted on that repair request." And don't do that. Just say, "I sent you the repair request. Take a look at that and let me know when you're ready to talk about it." And then let them tell you how they feel, because I think it's true. It's like, I think real estate 101 is we all have to learn not to give our opinion when you're showing a house, because you want to be like, "Oh, wow, that is so beautiful." And
Or look at this piece of crap.
or ooh, ooh, wow, I don't know about that. And you just don't know what your client, we've all sold those houses where we're like, "Wow, I never thought this house would sell." And yet there's a person for every house out there. It's
Isn't that
crazy.
true?
But the same thing is, don't condition the response for your clients, because a lot of times they will surprise you.
Totally. So, price versus terms. This is always such an interesting concept because low level thinking in real estate agency is that we're negotiating the price of a property. And price, in many cases, is the least important part of a negotiation. In some cases, it's the most important thing. But remember that terms affect the economics of the deal. And by economics, I simply mean how much that maybe seller walks away with or the cash to close for the buyer, right? Remember that a buyer generally, unless they're purchasing with cash, in which case there's still other terms, but a buyer generally is using quite a bit of leverage to purchase this property. So their cash to close position is important to them, right? For the seller, how much they actually walk away with, their seller net position generally is more important than the actual sales price, right? If I could decrease the sales price but increase their seller net, they might be pretty happy with that. And so would the buyer, right? That's kind of a win-win type
I
of
feel
thing.
like it's our job as well on both the buy and the seller side to understand what some of this negotiating wiggle room is and to be able to think creatively beyond just the normal things. We know some of the typical things, but here we try to list some of, the options that might be feasible, not in every deal obviously, but it's our job to keep these things top of mind as we enter into a deal. And talking to a client, like if you're on the listing side, to say, hey, what's your position? What kind of a loan do you have? Is it assumable? Would you be willing to carry paper for somebody who maybe doesn't have perfect credit, or maybe, doesn't want to
They're a 1099
they're 10,
starting
yeah,
a business or
exactly.
yeah.
They're first time home buyers and maybe they're not in the right position. There are a million different scenarios, right? But being creative, and I will say we have one of the masters of all things this on the call. John Sellers is like the king of understanding different ways. It's a puzzle, right? Putting a transaction together is a puzzle, and he understands multiple different scenarios that can come together. He's taught us a lot about
Mhm.
that. And I think that as agents, the more savvy you are in understanding that there's not just one way to do a transaction from the listing side or the buy side.
Well, and in this market, we're seeing a lot of hybrid or creative types of options come up, assumable loans. So learn about this, right? Educating yourself starts to give you more options. And what you'll find is your stress levels can stay a lot lower when you feel like you have more options. Usually people get stressed when they feel like they're between a rock and a hard place. Rock and a hard place is two options, and one of them's not great, and the other one's not great either. And so what's beautiful about having a lot of options, because you've studied the marketplace, you've studied history in real estate, and you understand what all your options are, is you say, okay, well, there's this rock in the hard place, but if I just walk over here, I've got something cool that I can present. And this is a great option for everybody, right? What I notice is that the more experienced an agent becomes, and experience doesn't mean years, by the way. You might be 1,000 years in the industry and be a dum-dum, or have 2 years in the industry and you've really done your homework and good for you, right? So that's experience. Experience means knowledge and compression. But I really think it's very important to understand what your options are. And we're gonna cover a lot more than these, but look at some of this stuff: closing dates, timelines, contingencies, inspection, repairs, financing, appraisal. This is a lot more than just price, right? A lot of that goes to terms. And so the sales price is just the public number that everybody sees. Yep.
Sometimes we think of, I mean, generally speaking, my rule of thumb is submit the cleanest offer possible, right? You want it no contingencies. It's the easier the better, but not always, because sometimes contingencies, we think of that as kind of a bad word. They might actually sweeten the pot for the seller, or on the seller side for the buyer.
Right.
So be open-minded. And I think the biggest thing, Christine put in the thing that she finds out, how the other agent likes to communicate. I mean, obviously, that's a great thing with your client too. And we're going to talk more about that next week. But with the agent, find out how they like to communicate. But beyond anything else, just communicate with the other agent.
I love that.
Not picking up the phone and calling is really a big mistake, because you could set your client up in a better position if you understand some things first. And if you get blocked from the agent, they say, we'd prefer just to see a deal, then say, great, no
Sure.
problem.
I actually really agree with what you just said. Pick up the phone and make a phone call. There's a bit of a resistance these days. How many people have noticed that like millennials just prefer to text over making a call, right? It happens a lot. And what I will say is this: when I receive a text message, especially on something that could potentially be stressful, my knee-jerk reflex that I've trained over time, this is not just natural, right? It's something that I've thought about, is to call the other person back, because tone and word choice, etc., is really important. So if I can have a conversation with that person, we can now start to control the arc and the narrative and really make sure that we're on the same page, not just in terms of terms, but also our emotional state around those terms. And sometimes I might read someone's text as angry because I'm feeling nervous. Turns out they were in a great space. They just wrote it really quickly, right? While they were, I don't know, in the bathroom at Starbucks. I have no idea. And so when I can talk to them, I can tell, oh, they're in a great mood. They feel good about this. Or, oh, I thought they were in a great mood. Turns out this is the sign of the apocalypse. Let's handle this now, right? So being able to talk to that person, hear their true tone of voice, and ask some clarifying questions is such an advantage. And so don't rob yourself of that opportunity. Make the phone call. And if they send you a text message and then they don't answer the call, say, hey, let's discuss, give me a call. And do not answer. It forces the phone call. And now you actually have an opportunity to discuss things and get the terms that everybody feels good about. Ooh, this
If
is a fun
this,
one.
then that. I like this because I feel like this can help you. So if a client, for example, says, well, we really need closing time, or an extended closing time. And we can say, that's going to be a little tough, but if you need that time, we may be able to make that agreeable with the buyer if they're willing to throw in the fridge. Do you think that would help? Or do you think, I mean, there are a million different things, but thinking about if this, then that can help you.
I love this because it's a bit of a bartering system, right? And what you also can do here to make things a win-win is to realize that a lot of times when the other side asks you for something, you can say, oh, that's great. Now, if we're willing to do that, or if the buyers are willing to do that, then would the other side be willing to do this? And now what you're doing is you're always utilizing that chess piece in exchange for, it's like a hostage exchange, right? And it doesn't have to be angry or argumentative or competitive. It can simply be an understanding that as humans, we value fairness, right? Leveling the scale. So, oh, I love that. I totally understand why they're asking for that. I think we'll be able to get to something now. If the buyers are willing to do that, would the sellers be willing to do this? Actually brings us to a level interpretation as a negotiator, right? And what you're also doing, though, on behalf of your client is you're getting something for them, right? Might be financial, might be terms related, might be timing related, who knows, right? And all of those things could be really beneficial. So never pass up an opportunity to use if this, then that. And we have an example here. If the sellers are willing to cover these repairs, then will the buyers be comfortable allowing that 2-week lease back that the sellers needed, right? Maybe that was something the buyers were a little bit shy on, but now that they want those repairs, man, that hostage exchange starts feeling a little bit better, right? Because now we've got something they want, they've got something we want, and we can do an exchange. It's great. Let's keep moving.
What buyers really want. So top priorities for buyers tend to be the lowest price and the best house.
Now, is that always true?
I mean, no,
Right.
but
it's mostly true, right?
yeah, and I think it's our job to figure out what they do want, because what are their top 3 things in a house? And we all know the whole phrase buyers are liars, which is true. It's not that they're liars. They just don't know what they don't know sometimes. I think is what happens, right? And they haven't really looked into the market or offerings or those kinds of things. So balancing wants and needs is really important. So identifying when to push for things like price versus quality, or timing versus financial. I mean, there are a lot of different things, and it's our job. This is why it's important to understand all the different ways that a transaction can fit together, is so that we can help to put them at, in the position that they need to be in.
That's it. And understanding this also gives you a little bit of a kind of a zoom out option here, right? A lot of times people will get really frustrated and stressed out, and they're talking about all these other things that really don't seem to matter. And you can help them kind of get back to their priorities, and understanding that this is probably their priority helps a lot, right?
And the conundrum is, look, buyers mostly want the best price for the best house. Sellers want the best price. They want to get as much
their
money,
interpretation of
and
the
they
best
don't want to have to do a lot for that, right? A lot of people think their house is perfect, or there's nothing wrong with it. We've been living here for 20 years. It's great. And so it's our job to play the middle, and to kind of figure out that everybody's there. What sellers really want, again, the
right?
easiest sale, but understanding their motivations.
Yeah, you bet. Well, and some of those motivations could be the speed of the sale, right? Minimal contingencies, having strong buyers, understanding that. And by the way, sometimes you communicate that in a contract. Sometimes you communicate that in a phone call to the other agent. I
Mhm.
would recommend both, by the way. And you can't say strong buyers in a contract, but you can say it on the phone. And I think that that's awesome. So holding costs, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, landscape, utilities, repairs, maintenance, HOA, security, time on market. Dude, guys, sometimes sellers are like, we don't have to sell, we can wait. And they've got an empty house. And I'll say, that's great. I understand it. And also, have you calculated your holding costs? I just want to make sure you understand what it costs every single month. Well, we don't even have a mortgage. Great. You still have utilities, repairs, maintenance, HOA, security, time on market.
Right.
Right. So, by the way, memorize that list and be able to rapidly fire it off like a flash roll so that you're just ready to go. Right. That's a really easy one to kind of close your eyes, be able to say it. And then strategies to satisfy those sellers, help them to understand how to present the best house up front. You talk to your sellers about this a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think, some people, some agents really like to stage or do kind of their own staging. They like to declutter. And some people will do, I know there are some agents out there that will do, for example, have their sellers do an inspection prior to putting it on the market and then making some repairs. Personally, I think that's a huge mistake because you can do that. And I've seen it backfire for agents where they do that and their clients put a lot of money or some money into making repairs. And then the buyer still has an inspection and they want repairs. Bottom line is, you could think that there's nothing to fix in a house and have 10 different inspectors out, and those 10 inspectors are all going to have things that need to be done. And buyers are going to feel like they need to have something done, right? So you know, temper it. I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for that, but just think about things that will set your sellers up for feeling like they are maximizing their position, whatever that is. If they just need to get out of town quickly, then okay, great. Help them understand what factors are going to be involved. John?
Lex, you hit something that's really important, in that when we're meeting with the seller and, there's repairs that need to be done, often on my fixtures, I have some things that I leave that, are minor repairs that maybe they'll get called, maybe they won't. They're not functional issues with the house. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be $200 or $500. I'm just not going to do it. And if they catch it, then I was going to plan it anyways. And if they don't, great, because it leaves them, especially on a fixture with a really nice house, it's nice to leave them something to call,
Yeah, exactly.
right? As you were hitting, because then, so it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to worry about that window that, maybe I didn't replace the windows and I've got a seal that's busted.
Yep.
Well, I'm not going to replace that. It's going to be $250. Maybe they won't call it. If they do, great. If they don't, great. I saved money, but it leaves them something for them to call
So
because
smart.
typically people want to call something, and it's
Right.
better to know what it is and decide, well, if I win, I win. If I don't, okay, we win, then it's fine anyways. I had it in my budget.
Right. It's like having an ace in
Strategically
your back
thinking
pocket.
about that negotiated ahead of time is smart.
And remembering that negotiation is a back and forth, right? So you want to leave yourself some plays with negotiation. So what I mean by that, like what John's saying, leave something there that may or may not come up. I've also seen a lot of listing agents encourage their sellers to offer a home warranty right off the bat. Well, that's great. But again, that doesn't mean that they're not, going to still
Ask for
ask for a
repairs.
bunch of repairs. And now you've promised this. So now you're on the hook for repairs plus the home warranty. For me, I like to withhold the home warranty as an option. We're not in a position to do those repairs. The clients have already moved to Wisconsin. But they would, they're more than happy to provide up to, $1,500, $1,200, $1,000, whatever it is, toward a home warranty. Or on the buy side, I never ask for a home warranty right off the bat because you can ask for that in lieu of repairs or as part of the repair addendum. So, again, just thinking about what are the negotiation tools that I never put that a washer and dryer or a fridge conveys with the house. I want to leave that on the table as a negotiating point on the listing side so that I can say, hey, we're willing to leave those things. Would that help? It
You
gives
hit on the head, like with a home warranty. So like on flip houses, I have to provide a home warranty. It's part of the contract, but I rarely say that it's going to be included. So then and then on a counter, I'll give it to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, even if it's a full price offer, I'll wait till the inspection's done and then I'll add it.
Yeah.
Right. So that they feel like they're winning. And sometimes like, gosh, I can't believe I'm giving that because they're paying 10 grand over and there's no repairs, but oh, well, it was included anyways. And then they just have more of a positive feeling about the house.
Right. And what's interesting is what both of you guys are saying is sometimes it's not what's going to happen. It's like when in the transaction it's going to happen matters a lot because it will feel different. If I write a listing that says, and home warranty included, it's not as valuable as if it feels like I had to give you a home warranty later in the deal and you got to win, right? For some reason, it feels better later as a win than it does just being included. And so remembering that to hold back a couple cards and think about your chess moves in advance gives you a massive amount of negotiating sweat.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's kind of like the carpet. I love this example, and we've all had this. You are selling a house that has terrible carpet. And I never encourage my client, unless there's some like biohazard or something, I always just give a carpet allowance. And because then you're acknowledging that you have an issue, but you're leaving it in the power of the buyer. And most agents understand that and can help translate that to the buyer to say, hey, listen, you're going to get $5,000 credit. That means you can use it towards your closing costs, which is helpful because that's $5,000 not out of your pocket that just gets automatically applied. And maybe the carpet's not that bad. Or maybe you do want to replace the carpet, but now you get to pick it because my taste is not always everybody else's taste. Maybe they don't want carpet because they've got horrible allergies or something. So, the more flexible and the more you have to negotiate with is really smart. And it feels, sometimes ridiculous in my mind to be saying this to such savvy agents that I know we have on these calls. At the same time, I have had conversations with other agents and they say something that's pretty simple that they do. And I'm like, oh, why have I not been doing that? That's such a great idea. So, they're only, sometimes we take the things that when we're first learning real estate that make sense to us and we employ those in our day-to-day activities as agents, and we just don't hear new ideas. So sorry for some of these things that are kind of rudimentary, but I think a lot of these are things. The holding costs were something that it took me a few months. I never realized it. And then I was like, oh man, I am not talking to my sellers about the cost that it is that they are incurring by holding that.
Yeah. And it's important too, because market timing, you can do this when you're negotiating pricing with your sellers up front, right? Where they're like, well, we really want to start 10,000 over what kind of the market's recommending. You can say, listen, I understand that could push us 180 days to a sale or 120 days to an actual successful sale. And that extra 4 months, when you add up principal, interest, taxes, insurance, landscape, utilities, repairs, maintenance, HOA, security, time on market, I like listing them all, by the way. And I'll say, let's list them out. What's your mortgage? What's your this? And once we get down to it and they realize they're spending $7,000 a month and holding it for 4 months cost them $28,000, they're really quick to drop a 10 grand and just get that bad boy sold.
And some clients don't care, but that's great because if you've said it and said, is that an important factor to you? And they're like, no, we don't care. It's in our budget. Then you're like, great. That's awesome. But at least you've asked and you are providing a more thorough and comprehensive view for your sellers. I mean, you're getting all the information.
Doug, did you unmute there? No. Oh. Okay. No worries. Okay, so we'll keep moving along here. So candy and vegetables is a really fun concept, and we learned this one from Tony Robbins, some of the advanced training that we've been doing within his organization. But candy is what people want or think that they want, right? Which is quick wins, flashy offers, all this kind of stuff. Vegetables is what people really need. Right? None of us really needs candy. We need solid, sustainable terms. We need things that are going to take good care of us. And so Ultimately, it's understanding what's the candy, what draws someone toward, right? And then what do they really need when you get there, which is integrating essential, non-negotiable terms into the deal, things that really truly benefit your client and potentially the other client as well. Taking care of both parties is not a bad thing, right?
How many of you guys have had that client that thinks that their house is absolutely perfect? There's like some big glaring issue and they don't believe it. And you, every time you have a showing or an open house, you are begging the other agents to give you the feedback so that you can give it to your client.
Yeah.
In hopes that they will finally realize that it does have an impact on value, that they live on the busiest street in town.
Yeah.
They can think whatever they want. You
I've
can
had
tell
that.
them that an appraiser will knock their value down by 30,000, and so their pricing needs to reflect that. They won't believe it until they hear it enough, right? But these are the things. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what? You can warn them and then you say, I understand where you are and let's try it. This is where, and again, next week we're going to talk about setting expectations, but kind of providing the candy by saying, let's do it. Well, for a couple of weeks, we'll see how showings go. Let's see what the feedback is. And then you can have the vegetables conversation of, it really does seem like people are noticing the street sounds. And so let's talk about what that might look like in a price reduction. Let's look again together at what the comps are for houses that have sold on this street.
Right. Well, in the candy, we give a couple examples here. Buyers want everything repaired. I want a new roof. I want a new AC. I want it. But if you can kind of zoom out and say, what do they need? What's their need, not their want, right? This might be a recontextualization of this, where you could say what they really need is to feel reassured that they'll be taken care of so that they are not going to get hit with a big cost down the road that they can't afford, right? Cash out of pocket. And so we might be able to reassure them that they'll not suffer hard costs. We could provide a warranty. We could do some other type of, warranty the roof even. There are companies that will do that. There's all sorts of stuff you can get that costs less for the seller. That's a win, and gives the buyer the reassurance they need that they're going to be taken care of in a negative situation. That's a win. It's a win-win. That's awesome. Let's keep moving. BATNA, this is a great concept. So this is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Walk us through this concept in real estate.
So everybody has kind of their ideal scenario in their brain, right? But it's your job to be able to step them down if that's not what's going to happen, which we all know. I mean, sometimes it does happen. Sometimes the transaction is like, boom, they get full price or more. There are no, people waive inspection. I mean, that was definitely 2 years ago, not happening as much now, but it's knowing in advance of what the next best, think of it this way, the next best alternative scenario for them is.
Right.
So, and preparing them. So, but you need to know that before they do.
Yeah, a lot of times it's said that chess masters think 17 moves ahead. You don't need to think 17 moves ahead. You'll give yourself a nosebleed and probably a headache. But I will tell you, you do need to think a couple. And thinking a couple moves ahead, knowing what's coming, and also not just assuming that it's all going to work out your direction helps a lot. So in application, you need to think about your position, but then your strategic alternatives if something comes back and they're like, no, we're not going to do that. It's, by the way, we love asking each other, what's the worst case scenario here, right? So we're writing maybe a repair addendum or we're writing an offer and we think, what's the worst thing that they can return to us? I mean, on an offer, they can just say no, right? So that's the worst. Maybe we'll write another offer. I don't know. But we're going to think through what that next move would be to get our client their outcome. And in addition, when you start understanding that from the other side, is a little advanced, but when you start understanding what's the next best thing on the other side of the deal as well. So if I'm representing the buyer, the seller says no, well, what would be second best for them in this situation right now? What is it that they really want? Kind of going back to the candy and vegetables. And we start moving toward that. And this helps us get to win-wins a lot faster.
And I think our last point here is the most critical, and that's that the win-win comes from talking to and working with in a cooperative manner the other agent. And you can set your clients up for success by just making that simple phone call right off the bat. and then keeping in communication with the other agent, because they're the only way that you are going to understand what the seller needs. And what if in a scenario they don't get full price?
Yep.
If you have a cash poor buyer and we have a seller that won't budge on their price, and quite frankly, some sellers don't need to budge on their price, right? Then offer more, but ask for the differential in in concessions toward close.
Yeah.
That's an old methodology,
Huge.
and it really works. It's a win-win for everybody, right? I mean, the seller gets what they want, but they're able to make the concession to allow the buyer to also get what they want. And everybody gets paid. It's so fun. So it's a win-win all the way around. But those are the things that we have to think about. But you cannot negotiate successfully unless you fully understand what the other side's position is.
Yeah. And building rapport with that agent is a good thing. By the way, if you find yourself recounting tales of your successes in real estate, in how you put another agent in a headlock and got them to succumb to your will because you won, you conquered them, you've probably ruined your relationship with that agent. And if you think about it, that's not a great thing for the long-term viability of your career. And so reconsider that. This is something I had to reconsider along the path. So I'm very comfortable talking about it because I've done this wrong and now I could do it right, right? And those are different things. So you just mature up over time. I had to mature up a little bit. Maybe that applies to you, maybe it doesn't. But you don't have to conquer the other agent. You simply need to get to an outcome everybody's really excited about. The power of silence. Well, I'm not qualified for this one. So Lexy.
Silence is definitely a powerful tool. It's really hard, but it's asking a question and actually waiting for the answer, right? And letting that person give their full answer. And sometimes if you're just quiet and you wait, people will give more information than they initially want to, which is great. It's helpful for you. But like after making a proposal, counter offer, whatever, just wait. Let the, and I think this is a big thing in asking, another agent what might be a good motivator for a seller. What do they need to get out of this scenario? Because I think you want to make it work. I want to make it work. They want to sell the house. I have a buyer who wants to buy this house. Let's figure this out. So asking things like, would an accelerated close date be helpful? If the house is already empty, chances are they have holding costs, right? So it looks stale on the market if they have a fallout. So it's better to just figure out how to work through the repair addendum together in a way that works for everybody than to go back on the market and have to explain why you had a sale fail.
Well, and imagine really quickly that you're representing the seller on a property and you've gotten a repair addendum and it has 900 items on it, right? I'm just going to pick a big number. They wanted you to polish the sink, right? They wanted you to change every light bulb. It's ridiculous. They're basically asking you to build a new house. And the temptation is to ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da through every single point. And what happens is we get lost in the details. The better strategy could be to call the buyer's agent and simply say, now, I was looking through everything here. Don't say good or bad or threatening or big or who knows. Don't put labels on it. I was looking through everything here and I'm curious, as we respond, what's most important to the buyer here? And then just be quiet. Because there's going to be a lot of chatter coming out of that listing agent. And sometimes agents, I'm not saying you, hopefully no one on this call, but sometimes agents dramatically over disclose in that moment and tell you about 100 million things that they shouldn't be telling you. And so long as you're not doing that, you haven't violated anything. So I tend to just let the other agent get to the bottom of the barrel and tell me everything that they want to tell me because they're giving me tools. They're giving me resources. And I appreciate that, right? That sharing or oversharing is really helpful.
Also calling because if I am representing a buyer, to be able to call and say, I'm not sure exactly what your seller's position is, and we're about to write up this repair done and we have inspections back. Can you tell me a little bit, would they rather have, a credit to close in lieu of of repairs? Are they, I know Jeff and I have purchased a house, a personal property for ourselves in the past, and we knew that they were elderly and infirmed sellers. They were no longer in the house. They had gone, one of them was hospitalized and one of them was in assisted care, and they were not in a position at all. And they had no family. So they were not in a position to make repairs. And we knew that. And so we said, we're going to do an inspection. We understand the situation. We're not going to ask for repairs, but we do want, we may negotiate a little bit with some other, in some other ways, but we want to just know what is, what's going on in the house. So we're going to go ahead and do an inspection. And that really helped to kind of settle the negotiations with the seller, because they were like, okay, they're not going to come back and ask us for something that we can't provide.
Yep.
But I would not have known that if I had not called the agent and said, what's the position of your seller on repairs?
And then been quiet, right? To let them actually answer. It's a huge thing. So power of silence is really powerful, guys. Don't forget that. Too many agents doing too much blah, 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 blah. All right. Anchoring. This is a cool concept, and it's important to remember. And the way that an easier way to describe this in negotiation is this is your first move. It's your starting position, right? So in chess, we have opening sequences like the Queen's Gambit, right? Everyone's familiar with that one now, and others. And what's interesting, though, is that your opening move tends to set the tone for much of the rest of the negotiation, but it also either creates options for you or it takes options away. Right? If you ask for something right up front, or if you're if your seller is demanding full price, they may get hosed at repairs, right? So what's important to understand is cause and effect. Where am I starting? And what am I really setting myself up for down the road to ensure that I have a positive outcome here? Because outcomes is really what we're in the business of.
You got to know this stuff before you can explain it to your clients and help them navigate those waters,
Big
right? And we're going to talk a lot more about that part next week. I'm really excited to have that group. Expanding the pie. This one is, Jeff is so good at this because, people, I don't know if anybody here is from a big family. I am. And there was always that moment, like it was kind of a big deal when I was a kid when we'd get to order pizza, but you're looking around the table at 7 other people and you're like, who's going to get the biggest piece? Who's going to get the one with the most pepperoni on it or whatever? And so we tend to look at it from this sense of loss or scarcity. Jeff is really great at looking at how to expand the pie.
Yeah, totally. Well, and really the ultimate phrase here is, instead of arguing over a slice of pizza, let's just get a bigger pizza. It might be things we can lump into a transaction. There might be additional terms that make it sexier for everybody and make the pie actually feel bigger, right? Maybe it's not actually bigger. Maybe the price tag can't be increased. That's simple thinking. But perhaps you're purchasing an acreage property and there's a tractor. Well, let's just see if we could include that. The seller didn't want it anyway. They didn't want to move that dang thing. Are you kidding me? It's 12 trillion pounds. So for them, it's a benefit. For the buyer, it's a benefit. It's a win and a win, right? So ultimately, we're always looking for, you want to look around. Every deal's a snowflake, right? So, but you may need to look to say, instead of fighting over the last slice of pizza, how can I just get a bigger pizza here, right? And that's a really great thing to remember.
Focusing on interests, not positions. So negotiators get stuck on holding the line of like, but we said no, and so now we're going to say no. But trying to find ways to still meet the expectation and needs or interests of everybody involved. There's always a way to do that, and asking questions to understand what those interests are is essential.
One of my favorite ways to win is to let the other side think I've lost, right? And so it's important to remember that sometimes, especially if you can do what Lexy was talking about earlier and John was talking about, where you've held something back, right? You've kept an ace in the hole. And so now you get to this position, they say, well, we're gonna ask for you to fix the blah, blah, blah. And you knew they were, right? And you go, oh, well, man,
see what I can do.
Let's see if we can make that happen. But you knew all along you were going to fix it. Now, that is a really easy position to land in if you planned for it from 17 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago, or hopefully not 17, 7 weeks ago, right? And now you're at this position and you knew this was coming all along, but you planned for it. And as a result, you now have that ace in the hole. You can come up with it and your buyer's like, or seller, right? And everybody thinks that they just got to win because they should. And it's awesome. But that's focusing on an interest. A position is, like Lexy said, we said no, it's a no. And if they're being jerks, yeah, okay. Well, now you're just getting stuck on ego, and ego's not your amigo. All right, let's keep moving. These are deal negotiation points. We are not going to read this slide to you, but this is the one that I would recommend. If you don't have this somewhere in your arsenal, take a screenshot of this bad boy right now, because this is in order the deal negotiation points, all the way from initial offer and price negotiation, all the way to the potential for termination, dispute resolution, or at least closing date negotiations, right? All of this matters in a deal. And sometimes simple-minded agents, which I know nobody on here is, will get stuck on just price or price and repairs, right? That's the easy way to do real estate. But unfortunately, it's not very sophisticated, and it tends to limit you in terms of your ability to actually close transactions. What I've noticed is that super strong agents are not having the same fallout rate right now. Maybe they still lose one every once in a while. That is going to happen, guys, right? It's not to say you'll never lose one. But super strong agents know how to keep a deal together because they know everything on this slide. This is not a shock to somebody who's done a ton of deals. But if you're maybe newer to the industry, you got to study this slide and start making some lists of, here's some other things I can negotiate around, right? When I do the final walkthrough, or what's my post-closing occupancy, or leaseback terms, or, right? There's a lot of stuff on here. And so again, we're not going to go deal specific by deal specific.
But another thing about this that could be helpful is, we'll post this as a PDF when we put it in the community center, in the library there. But if you're working with a newer agent, maybe you run a team and you're training somebody, maybe you have a friend that joined you at EXP and they're new to real estate. This is so helpful, you guys. Don't ever imagine or just assume that people know anything.
Right.
Think of it, it's hard to even remember back to when you first started and all the things that you needed to learn. And we only have so much capacity. So again, there are different ideas out there, different things to know. Maybe you want to just pass this along to somebody else that you're helping.
And they're market specific as well. So start to study that, right? You can use a resource like ChatGPT to actually ask questions about some of these. In a typical real estate deal, how could an appraisal contingency negotiation actually play out? And how does that pertain to market cycles that we're in, right? That's a fairly sophisticated question, but still, right? And it might say sometimes people are going to be starting to waive appraisal contingencies because that buyer knows that they're just going to have to cover it if it comes in low, right? Okay. It's good to helpful to understand that. Well, it's not a cycle we're in at the moment, but good to know when that kind of stuff can show up. Next up here, overcoming common obstacles. This is interesting. There are some challenges that can show up in negotiations. What are some of the ones that you've bumped into, or some of these on the slide?
I have that list, which is good. Stubborn clients or unrealistic clients, combative agents, unrealistic expectations, which we're going to talk about next week a lot. I'm so excited about that. Market conditions, stress and fear, uncertainty and doubt. Those are definitely big ones. And those are things that honestly, I feel like in negotiations, it's a little bit of timing, right? Sometimes things will bubble up. You know, they're going to come up. They're going to get nervous about, they might have some fear, uncertainty, and doubt when you get to the repair point, or maybe appraisal. And then you can have those conversations. Some conversations, it behooves you to do upfront, to preempt those concerns. And then you can smooth the waters a little bit in advance for your clients. Other things, it's better to let them naturally come up because it's part of the negotiation and it can work in your favor. Some strategies is, just thinking ahead, sitting down and looking, knowing your contract, understanding where are the elements that might come up that might pose a bump in the road, and how you're going to handle that and how you're going to set those expectations with your clients for sure.
And understanding what causes stress for people, it's not to say that we need to all go get a degree in, therapy or counseling or whatnot. But there is going to be a moment, if you haven't already encountered it, it's coming, when you write a part of your contract, an addenda, something that needs to happen, and the other side, meaning the agent in particular, maybe they present it to their client, the client gets angry at them, and what do they inevitably do to you as the as the other agent on the other side of the deal? They tend to project their emotional insecurity inside the deal onto you, generally through poor behavior is what I would call it, right? Things that we wouldn't allow a 2-year-old to do, yelling, screaming, calling names, things like that. But as adults, they feel more entitled to those behaviors. And so what I will recommend is, if you can understand in those moments, the emotional tapestry that makes up a human is complex. This person is uncomfortable right now and probably facing some fears, stresses, uncertainty, doubts about whether or not the transaction, and it's being fed by their client. Then you might have the emotional wherewithal, not just to put them back together, but also to, through them, help them to put their clients back together and to find a win-win outcome that everybody's satisfied with. I will tell you this, don't go there. So I like to think about dogs a lot. Lexy's a huge dog lover, which is awesome. And dogs have, and you've heard about this, alpha dogs and beta dogs. Beta dogs tend to be barkers. They're yappy. They tend to get stressed out. And that yappiness is interesting because when you place a beta around several strong alphas, they stop barking. And in human behavior, it's the same thing. If somebody comes to you and they're yapping, 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 they're a stressed out beta dog in that moment. They are not the leader. If you can simply understand that that's your moment to actually lead the transaction, you can help them by simply not going there. They don't need you to bark. They need you to have certainty and confidence back toward them. And when you give them that, they will come your direction. Eventually, it might not be on sentence number 1, but be patient. Be the alpha dog. Joanne says yes with a fire. Joanne, have you experienced this before, where somebody might be coming to you as let's call it the yappy dog, and then your ability to maintain your calm and cool has actually been helpful? Do you mind if we bring you up for a second?
Sure.
Awesome. Tell me about that.
I mean, sometimes it's just like, okay, so here's what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Here's what we're going to do. And just, like this, because then they're like, okay, what are we going to do? And then just smooth it out and say, this is an easy solution to this. And here's how it's going to work.
Yeah.
And they're usually pretty receptive. I mean, they might, like you say, keep barking a little bit, but after a while, they're going to be like, okay, it just tends to be soothing when, you don't mirror their panic or whatever. So
I love that. It's so funny. I mean, you're a dog lover, and I know that.
Yeah.
It's funny with dogs too, because what you'll notice is alpha dogs almost get confused by yappy dogs, right? They'll just kind of look at them like,
what is your deal?
you're going to be okay. Like, we're fine, that kind of thing.
Well,
And we are trainable just like dogs. I mean, it is really uncanny when you think about how, rewarding good behavior, ignoring bad behavior works with humans just as well.
100%. But I think that confidence is really important. Joanne's right, because your clients at the end of the day, your clients are going to be looking to you to be the anchor point, to be the stabilizer. And if you're not, and that's why I always tell people, please, understand that you need to know what your contract is. You need to know what happens and what the options are before your client does. Because if you're like, well, I don't know, I have no idea what we're going to do now. Like, what? That is why, first of all, why do they want to pay you? And especially now when we have contractual agreements for payment on both sides of the deal now. So you better know how to guide your client through all the different points. And if you don't, That's what your broker's for. That's what we're for. That's what, all of these trainings are for.
Well,
And
especially
so-
strong agents. And I see Liz just raised her hand and came up on screen as well here. And we'll get to you in just a second. I know this is true for you, though. A lot of times you simply have to decide to be the stronger agent, the leader in that moment, because they're clearly reacting and they're in fear mode. And it's not personal. Even if it feels personal, and sometimes, good golly, it feels personal, but you just have to let it go and to say they're stressed out. They're probably not going to figure or remember what a turd they're being later. And so, let's just give them a little bit of latitude here, and I'll just not be the yappy dog. Liz, what were you going to say?
Hey, so there might be a little bit of echo because we're in two different rooms here, but I've lost my cool before in a transaction, and I'm always like, that sucks. I really let this person get the best of me. Like, it happens, right?
Of course.
But the more we can keep our cool, even if they're yelling, like setting the tone, and maybe even saying, like, there's no reason for us to get upset. Both of our clients, we want to help both of our clients. Our clients, both the seller and the buyer, all have a goal, and we're to help them do that and slow down the way that you're talking, right? Because that helps a lot. But I think it happens more often than not that agents get super heated. And
Yep.
I've had it happen the minute I deliver a repair addendum.
Yep.
Their attitude changes. They decide to ruffle their feathers to make sure that that they're bigger, and it's just really, really unnecessary.
Right.
And someone told me once, Liz, you're the surgeon, you're the professional. You go in, you cut the problem out, you sew them back up, and you move on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always rang really true to me. And since that moment, again, every once in a while you lose your cool, and just try not to do that. But for the most part, that's exactly what I do. People hire us to be the professional.
Right.
And the more heated you get and the more upset you get, the more, if you're the professional and you're doing that, then they're thinking this must really be a big deal.
Right.
And so I'm going to get really upset too. And so when that happens and both parties are really upset and passionate, it never really works out the way it should, because one of your slides earlier said something like, make sure you understand what their underlying desires are versus their stance, something like that.
Yeah,
because
position versus
things
interest.
are passionate, they'll just be like, well, now I have to be right. I don't care who it is. They're not getting my house no matter what.
Right.
Even though it's just like a $500, a couple $1,000, and really, in the big scheme of things, that's way better than them sitting on their house and paying $7,000 in holding costs, right?
For another 30 days or 60 days.
But some people get stuck on principle.
Mm-hmm.
They sure do.
And I think as agents, when our clients get stuck on principle, we need to ask them that. And then that's when because what they are considering principle is usually based in emotion, right? This is a lesson I've learned a few times from John Sellers, is you can be empathetic and understanding of that position. And then you say, yes, and then you help them to understand the kind of transactional realities or the economics of the situation, put it into context. And this is where understanding DISC really helps. So that if you're dealing with an S and they love this house, they were the person that walked in and they were like, oh my gosh, my pie rack is going to go so perfectly right there. And they're putting furniture in the house on their first showing, right? That person is going to get emotional, but to bring them back to, I know it's $4,000 and it seems like a lot. Is $4,000, we've looked at a bunch of other houses and I watched you light up. Are you going to regret not having this house because of $4,000? And if it's a big enough deal, we'll find another house. I understand. But let's think about that.
Right.
And so principle, we like to say, I'm standing on principle. That's bullshit, you guys.
You're just being stubborn.
Principle is us trying to put emotionality into some sort of logic box, and it doesn't really fit there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if principle is, I believe in taking a different approach to energy solutions, and I will only purchase a house that has solar then your principle is don't show them houses that don't have solar.
Right.
Duh. Okay, that's a principle that you can stand on. But principle of they are going to give me those repairs or we're not going to buy, then you have to remind them that means your PIRAC has to go somewhere else.
Yes.
The money you spent on inspections, the money you already paid for the appraisal, you don't get those things back, and that's fine. Some people are good.
Some states you might not even get your full earnest money back. So
Yeah.
And also, you can say to them, if this house would have been $4,000 more when you walked through the door, would that have prevented you from buying it?
100%.
that's such a great line, and actually I've heard that from a few people, including John and you, all top agents, right? So it's what's interesting, guys, and what you'll notice I mean, Liz has won the Icon Award, Top Production Award at EXP, like I don't even know 150 times or something at this point. She has to be 150 years old, looking great for 150, by the way. But it's what's hilarious is top producers like Liz, like John, like Christine, Joanne, everyone participating at such a high level today. Appreciate it. Top producers know what they'll do in these moments, right? They've seen this before, right? I remember when I was getting started in real estate, I had somebody tell me, when you're getting started in real estate, it's like running through the woods and there's no light. You're going to hit some trees and it's going to hurt, right? It's just, you just can't see the branches coming and they're just slapping you in the face and you're going to scratch a retina. Like it just is awful. And then what starts to happen over time is it's like the lights are on. Well, running through the woods with the lights on is not the hardest thing in the entire world. You still have to bob and weave and duck and, it takes some effort, but you can see stuff coming. And so what I would also recommend, this idea of dealing with, let's say, a frustrated agent on the other side of a transaction. First off, my very best recommendation on this for anyone is don't take the bait. I think of it as bait every time. If I hear someone escalate, why in the hell? I've been doing real estate for 30 years and you're a dumbass. Okay, that's bait, just so you know. In case you don't recognize, that's a shiny lure and I want to bite the heck out of it and tear their head off. But does that get me anywhere? Does it get my client in particular anywhere down the road? Absolutely not. And so in that moment, I have to ask myself, what outcome am I trying to produce and what's the best chess pathway to get there? And think of it as chess, not sword fighting, and you'll be in a lot better of a position. All right, let's get back to our slides. This is awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Everybody
I
jump
was just going to jump in, and I don't know how to raise hand on my iPad.
Hey,
Sorry.
Christine Kites. Hey, go ahead. Here, I pulled you up.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of, what Liz was saying on there, and she hit the nail on the head when she was chatting in there about this subject. And the thing is that you're going to run into this with agents and clients, and emotion is everything. And when you understand that real estate transactions are emotional, and so I've had it happen where there's a delay in closing for my seller. They've already got their plan, their flight, they're moving out of state. It's stressful. It's absolutely stressful. And we have to remember that we're there to try to help find solutions in their stress, and we don't match their emotion. We definitely try to calm the situation or remain calm ourselves, even if they're out of control with their emotion, because to me, I feel like they need to go through it at a certain point. They need to finish their emotional moment. And, once they're through it, then we can then probably talk, but you have to let them get through it.
I love that.
And so you let them have their moment with it. You understand? I understand this is very stressful. I can hear that this is stressful for you. You have to acknowledge where they're at. They need to be heard. They need to feel that emotion, and you let them feel the emotion. You acknowledge the emotion, and then you find the solutions after that. Okay. And just recently, when you said repair addendum, I was like, that's exactly when you get a repair addendum, and it's like, somebody on the other end. And I had to deliver a repair addendum to someone, literally hand it to them. And I saw the emotion flush, just them. What do you mean? What does this mean? What are you trying to say? It was just this. And it was like, okay, so this is what I understand. This is where the buyer's at. They're not trying to convey this. And so it's also like that agent has to go present that information. And the emotion you're getting from them is the fact that they know they're delivering this news. They're going to be getting something from their client. So you do your best to work with that agent to help with the information that they can take with them with this repair addendum in hopes that it's delivered well.
Well,
That's
Christine,
my goal.
and something that you just said that I love is, which I can actually maybe flip on its head. It's important for us to remember as agents that our value actually shows up as the reason we are paid whatever percentage or however your commission structure is. We're not talking about that on videos anymore. But anyway, whatever your commission structure is, the reason you're being paid good money for doing this work is because there is work to be done. And the work to be done is not filling out a contract that the buyer or seller could have filled out on their own. The work to be done is your knowledge and your market expertise and your ability to translate that and help bring this deal together. And so remembering that as an agent, when you're representing a seller and you get that big, long repair addendum, that's freaking game day, baby. This is what we train for. Like, this is your moment. It's not,
Right.
this is why you're paid so well, right? If you wanted every deal to just be, slow pitch, underhand, or T-ball, well, come on, then you're going to be, getting some type of really diminished position on those transactions. And that's not why you went into real estate in the first
Well,
place.
and it's just like what she was saying, Joanne was saying in here, if as a listing agent, I would be thinking this, and as a buyer, the other part of it is talking with your clients prior to writing that repair. It starts when you start writing it, and how that gets written up before you actually deliver it is if you have the ability to sit there and converse with the buyer, go over that whole inspection report and narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow. Well, do you feel that this is still important if this, and this? Well, yeah, you're right. Now I really, no, we're just going to do this and this. Okay, great. So now we're just doing this, and this. Is that where you feel comfortable? Is that more? And you keep confirming and narrow. And well, I guess, we could really do that. I'm capable of doing that. I guess, no, we don't need that on there. And the more that you can keep narrowing it down to keep the deal together and have the buyer understand we're not going to ask for 900 things, it starts there. And then you can take it to the listing agent and then hope there that you could say and confirm we've gotten this narrowed down, right? So it's a whole process. And
you bet.
Anyway,
that's such great critique. And again, from another top agent, and it makes sense, right? This is what everyone should notice, is that people with experience understand that there's a lot of work that happens before you ever get to that position, and then understanding what's able to happen next. It's your ability to have a crystal ball for the future and to understand history, right? And if you haven't done that, if you haven't laid the groundwork, you're always going to feel stressed out, and you're probably going to be one of the agents that's yelling at me on the phone, which I prefer not, right? Let's get back to the slides right quick.
Any information that you can get together prior to presenting an offer is always better for you also. That's just like a huge tip. The more information you know about what you're going to ask for is helpful to negotiate it.
I love that. So let's talk really quickly. I mean, we've actually knocked that out already, and I love that. Real quick, kind of key takeaways here. What do you think people need to remember on kind of the heels of this training today?
I love this whole idea of price versus terms. The reality is price, right? I mean, we know if the price is not right on a house, the market is going to respond and will need to come down. It's just price is kind of a big factor, but at the same time, especially in today's market and with today's expectation, terms can be as important, if not more important, or at least a really good negotiation tool in addition to price. So it's both. And really being empathetic, flexible, creative, but to remember that this is really, when we get hired to do this job, and that's what you guys have been talking about, is, it's not that we're, it's kind of like mediation or arbitration, but not, I mean, you're truly hired to be a negotiator. You represent your client, but you have to understand, and Joanne put it in there, and I think it's so essential. You have to think of it, if you're on the buy side, you've got to understand what the listing agent is thinking. You've got to understand what an inspector is going to see. You've got to understand what an appraiser is going to see. Depending, it doesn't matter, sell side, buy side. That's the deal. You have to look at this from multiple different eyes. You are the expert. Clients only know what their position is, and they are very limited because they don't have the experience. They haven't dealt with inspectors the way you guys have. And so helping them to distill all of that down, that is our job. And you do that in large part with cooperation from the other agent.
Yep. And our job as salespeople means we're always selling. And selling in this case doesn't mean we're trying to sell a cell phone and buy a pen or whatever. It literally means that we are always in the business of influence. And so you're going to have a client that you're dealing with, and that client will get stressed out. Your job is to not go there with them. That's bait, right? You're going to be dealing with another agent. That agent may get stressed out. Your job is to not go there. That's bait. And so thinking about those dogs being the alpha dog that isn't barking, some of that kind of stuff, these are things that I would really keep front of mind, and then educate yourself around deal structure. Because sometimes when we say price versus terms, and you're like, oh, that's cool to know. It's 3 words, right? It's easy to remember. But understanding that terms piece is a pretty big deal, right? There's a lot baked into that. We've seen all sorts of hybrid creative financing deal structures coming through now. It's really awesome, right? But I might be willing to pay $50,000 more for a house if the terms are I pick up an assumable mortgage on half the deal and the other deal is offered at 6% with only 4% down or something, right? And so knowing that I could go there gives me different kind of options, and options are power.
At the end of the day, we're plate spinners, right? We've got a lot of plates and we're spinning all those plates. And I think this session was really talking about staying focused on knowing the contract and dealing with the other agent. Next week, we're going to talk about that other really important plate that we spin, and that is managing client expectations, which is if you can manage negotiations with the other side and manage your client expectations, that's when the win-win happens.
It's a big synergy
and
moment.
So this is why we kind of wanted to bridge today our session on, how do we negotiate? How do we deal with that other agent? What are some of the little levers that we can pull along the way? Next week, super excited.
Big panel.
We're going to have a cool panel to talk about managing expectations. And I'm telling you, you may think you're good with people and you know all the tricks and you've done some good stuff. Just wait till you hear what some of our experts say. I learn from them all the time. Holy cow, it's going to be some good fire there for you guys. So
it'll be
next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, September 11th. And the following week after that, we're bringing in Holly Mabry, who's, I believe, Vice President for Brokerage Operations for all of eXp Realty, and possibly some other guests to speak about the state of real estate. It's going to be very exciting. And so we got a lot of cool stuff coming up. Bring some guests and bring yourself. We'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for being here, supporting the community, and for being part of all of our success. Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Talk to you soon.